ISIS beheads another American. Meet the new face of ABC News. And 10-year-olds with cell phones. All these stories and more coming up on The Rundown.
All right, stand by. 10 seconds. Ready, camera, record. 3, 2, 1. Record.
Greetings and thanks so much for joining us. This is The Rundown, where we take a look at some of the big stories making headlines. I'm your host, John Phillips. Joining us from Washington, D.C. is PJTV contributor Michelle Fields. And here in studio, we're joined by stand-up comic Mr. Stephen Cruiser. Now it's time to go to the top of The Rundown, and we begin with Michelle.
At the top of my rundown, another American has been beheaded by ISIS militants. Steven Sotloff was the latest victim of the gruesome act. The 31-year-old was captured in Syria back in August of last year. His execution follows last month's beheading of fellow American journalist James Foley. The White House said their thoughts and prayers are with the Sotloff family. Before the beheading, Sotloff read a statement. We will play that for you now.
Steven Joel Sotloff. I'm sure you know exactly who I am by now and why I am appearing before you. And now, it is time for my message. Obama, your foreign policy of intervention in Iraq was supposed to be for the preservation of American lives and interests. So why is it that I'm having to pay the price of your interference with my life? Am I not an American citizen? You've spent billions of U.S. taxpayers' dollars, and we've lost thousands of our troops in our previous fighting against the Islamic State. So where's the American people's interests in reigniting this war? From what little I know about foreign policy, I remember a time when you could not win an election without promising to bring our troops back home from Iraq and from Afghanistan and to close down Guantanamo. Here you are now, Obama, nearing the end of your term, and having achieved none of the above, and deceivingly marching us, the American people, into a blazing fire.
I'm back, Obama, and I'm back because of your arrogant foreign policy towards the Islamic State, because of your insistence in continuing your bombings in Al-Merli, Zumar and the Mosul Dam, despite our serious warnings. You, Obama, have yet again, through your actions, killed yet another American citizen. So just as your missiles continue to strike our people, our knife will continue to strike the necks of your people.
And, you know, the State Department continues to say that they will not say that they are at war with ISIS. The president gave a speech yesterday, and he said that, yeah, they are going to do whatever they can to punish ISIS, but then when reporters followed up and said, you know, what are you exactly going to do? What does that entail? He sort of backtracked and said, well, we're going to talk to the international community and try to de-escalate their influence. So it seems as though there are going to be no repercussions for this. He's already said that they don't have a strategy. And these people are monsters. They need to be destroyed.
Well, first of all, I'm not entirely convinced that this happened weeks after the first killing. ISIS sent out an apology on Twitter, I don't know if you saw this, for the release date of the video. Like, yeah. They wish that they would have waited for sweeps before they allowed the...
Then they fired their PR guy.
Yeah, before the second beheading came out. But here's the thing. These guys, as Michelle mentioned, are monsters. The only thing they respond to is violence. The only thing that they've responded to for years and years and years is violence. So unless we're going to deal with beheading after beheading after beheading after beheading, at some point we're going to have to go over there and kick their teeth in.
The perception problem with half of the country still exists. I was assured in no uncertain terms just 3 days ago by a Democrat friend of mine on Twitter who I respect that Obama's all over this. He's on this. He's taking care of this right now. And I was kind of being petty and ridiculous for saying that the president seemed to be flailing right now. And I said,
by the way, which is the same thing Dianne Feinstein is saying.
Yes. And almost everyone is saying who's not, but there's just so many people in the public that, oh, he tossed over a few airstrikes, and that's another big thing too. That where some response doesn't mean it's adequate response, doesn't mean what you're doing. You know, this cosmetic, we're gonna have a couple of airstrikes so I can say I did something, isn't what needs to happen right now. You need to go after them. You need to say they're evil. They need to be eliminated. But you see what happens, like when Andrea Tantero said it. You know, you're getting a storm, a media storm for saying what should be said. So there's. you know, there's still a question of will on the part of, I would say, half of the American public.
It's true. Those videos are just gruesome, though. And I know ISIS thinks it's going to help persuade the American people to start thinking their way, but it's going to backfire.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that not backfiring.
A friend of mine, John Gabriel from Ricochet, said, though, he said for the next, you know, until January of 2017, all the bad actors in the world know they can get away with anything because the U.S. has a weak president and won't respond.
Right. And also, whenever someone in government or in the media says, well, let's let the international community take care of it, that means they don't care.
Punt.
Right?
Punt. Pooch kick.
When someone comes to right-wingers and says, you know what, we really should do something about Darfur, and right-wingers say, let's let the international community handle it. That means we got bigger fish to fry.
Yeah, most every European country is fitting their women for hijab right now, and we're going to ask them how to deal with ISIS. Sure.
All right, Cruiser, what do you have for us?
At the top of my rundown, a teacher is given a medical evaluation and suspended for writing a fictional tale of a school shooting. The 8th grade teacher, Patrick McLaw of Maryland, wrote The Insurrectionist and Lilith's Heir under the pen name Caius Volater. The futuristic school shooting takes place in 2902. 947 people were killed in the largest school massacre in the nation's history. In the story, the teacher is barred from coming onto school property or participate in school events. Police swept the middle school where he works ahead of the start of the school year. Police also searched the 23-year-old's house and found nothing. It ain't paranoia if it's happening, okay? This was in the Atlantic, and the Atlantic headline said this was Soviet-style punishment. Here, and this is for a 3-year-old novel, by the way. It's not like he wrote it over the summer and they went, oh, this guy might have something on his mind. This thing has been on Amazon for 3 years now. But we always talk about the mental health component when it comes to gun violence and things like that. And we always say, yes, most of the people who commit gun violence have mental health issues. The one thing, though, and I know as pundits we're all supposed to have black or white answers, I haven't quite figured out how to take care of this problem. You can't start casting, oh, he's crazy, suspicion on everybody who ever talks about guns in order to prevent this kind of violence. If you've got a better idea, please tell me what it is, because I can't figure it out.
Well, you have to look at it in totality. I mean, is the guy a paranoid schizophrenic? Does the guy have mental problems? If so, why did you hire him in the first place? But I'm very hesitant to just take the school district's word for it, because they've shown no ability to do that at any point in the past. Just here in Los Angeles, there was a guy by the name of Mark Byrne who was teaching at Miramonte Elementary School and was literally putting semen on Nilla wafers and feeding it to the kids and taking pictures of it. And the school district couldn't fire him because they said that they weren't checking all the boxes that the union had set up to get rid of teachers that do stuff like this. They had to pay him, I think it was $45,000 to leave. Well, you can't fire that teacher, then I think you're using a pretty quick hook to get rid of this guy.
That's the thing, Michelle. John brings up a point here. This pulls in one of the big leftist, traditionally anti-gun constituencies here, which is the teachers' unions now, who should be all over protesting this. I haven't heard anything yet so far about what their response is thus far, but could this kind of overreaching, egregious behavior on the part of the school district finally be enough to get a big leftist constituency in on, you know, to fight this overreaction to the gun problem in the United States?
You know, I just don't think that the unions care, because this is an issue that they care about. They are so anti-gun that they are just going to go along with this district. But this is obviously, they are being way too cautious over this. If he had a history of some strange things that he was doing that would make them feel as though he had mental issues, then I'd understand the mental evaluation. But I think they're rushing to judgment and being a little too cautious in this case.
When you're jailing the artists and the people, it's bad. Okay, he was taken for an emergency medical evaluation, as if he were going to snap any moment for this 3-year-old book.
That people always do that when they're trying to knock you down a peg or two. They always say you're crazy.
Lock up Stephen King.
How about Jack Kevorkian? Did you see any of his art? It was like people gargling with razor blades.
Good for him.
Yeah.
He was a special snowflake.
Crazy stuff. Anyway, at the top of my rundown, there's some big changes going on at ABC News. David Muir has taken over for Diane Sawyer. During Sawyer's 8 years as anchor of the show. It was called World News. Muir, who's been with the network for some time, is changing the show back to World News Tonight. That's what it was called when Peter Jennings was the anchor. Muir took over as the main anchor on Monday. The announcement was made back in June. Sawyer will still be at the network for ABC doing special interviews similar to what Barbara Walters did. Let's go ahead and take a look at a clip from past Monday's show.
From ABC News World Headquarters, this is ABC World News Tonight with David Muir.
Good evening, and it is great to be with you on this Labor Day, and it is an honor to begin this journey with you. And I just wanted to take a moment to thank so many of you for your messages and your tweets, so many during the news tonight, and one in particular from Diane. Thank you, friend, for everything. And so one more time, as I've often said, for Diane Sawyer and all of us here at ABC News, have a good evening, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow night. Good night.
And Cruiser, one of the things that ABC News thinks that David Muir is going to do is bring in a new generation of viewers, maybe get the numbers up. Diane Sawyer, of course, had a long storied career at ABC News. Prior to that, in the Nixon White House, and was a fixture on Good Morning America. But they think that this guy will provide a jolt of energy into this broadcast. I, for one, have not watched the network news in probably a decade. Not ABC, not NBC, not CBS. It's just something that I don't do. I think previous generations did it and might still do it, but putting a young anchor in is not going to bring a young audience in my opinion.
Well, it's the first time I think they've acknowledged that they need to do that. Any one of the big three network news entities has done that. But every time I see or hear anything about the network evening news, it's always online. I'm reading about it. I'm not watching it. And it's like a voice coming from my grandparents' house in 1972 or something. It's such a blast from the past. It's such a relic to me. And I'm like, but the stunning thing is still a lot of people are getting their news from network news because their constituency hasn't died off yet. You know, and I don't want them to because my parents are their demographic right now. But it's mostly, I would say, people late 60s and older who watch network news.
Sure.
And I don't know that David Muir, charming and as young as he is suddenly going to get a lot of the Comedy Central people over to World News Tonight.
How about it, Michelle? Has Twitter and the Drudge Report and PJTV and getting your news on your phone and pretty much wherever you go, has that made the network news obsolete?
Well, I don't think it's obsolete yet because there's still, like Cruiser said, a large demographic of older people who continue to watch the network news. I do not watch the network news, and I don't think that getting a young, charismatic person is going to suddenly get all the young people to change their habits and turn on the TV. We saw MSNBC try to do this. They went and hired Ronan Farrow, who is a young, good-looking guy, and they just assumed, well, he's young, so that means young people are going to start watching the news. That obviously did not happen. So I think that they just need to actually change the formatting and try new things, not just getting a new person. People are watching their news and their TV on their laptops, and you need to change with the times. And changing a person is, I don't think, going to fix that.
What would you do?
Are you talking to me or Cruiser?
Yeah, what would you do?
Well, I would try doing more online stuff. I think what we're doing here at PJ, what Glenn Beck's doing, is the future. So I would try doing more of that, and also utilizing Twitter and utilizing social media into your broadcasts.
What would you do, Cruiser?
I think the future, and we've talked about this with entertainment, I think it applies to news as well. I think it's all going to be moving in an a la carte kind of direction where people can pick and choose what they want. And as more of that happens, the cheaper it becomes. I mean, the network's still, you know, hey, we're free. And that's their big pitch. But they're free to people who are spending $120 a month on cable already anyway. So I think that the news is going to have to go into something, because that keeps it a little fresher, too. I mean, when you have to put together a broadcast for the evening hours and you have to have a production meeting to do that, you're getting, in internet hours, really stale news by then.
Here's what I think they should do, and you're absolutely right, and you are right too, Michelle. But in their opinion, it's the editorial judgment of, we're doing these 7 stories today, and this is the news of the day. In the old days, they could do that, and that was the news of the day, because that's what people watched, because there was no cable, there was no talk radio, there was no internet. Now people decide for themselves what the top 7 stories of the day are. What they can do, and with the resources they have, which separates them from a lot of the bloggers or a lot of the content that you would get on talk radio or elsewhere, is that they can respond to breaking news. And Fox has changed dynamically how they cover the news with Shepard Smith,
Yes.
where they just do breaking news. And if you look at the numbers for CNN, they skyrocket when there's breaking news, and when there's not breaking news, nobody's watching the network because people decide what news they're going to watch.
Yep.
They don't let Wolf Blitzer decide. So if I was in charge of the network news, I would just literally make it at 30 minutes in response to whatever the breaking story is of the day, and just go there live and do a live show for the East Coast, do a live show for the Middle West, do a live show for Los Angeles, the Pacific Coast, and do a live show for Hawaii and Alaska.
That's a brilliant idea that requires a completely philosophical, fundamental shift on the part of the networks, because those 7 stories you mentioned before, and this is not me being flippant, this is the truth, generally all came from the New York Times. That's how the network news picked their news every day. They'd read the morning Times, and then they would go with that as the news for the day. So it would require a huge shift, and I think they'll be forced there sooner or later.
I think so, and I think the success of Shepard Smith will lead the way. All right, now it's time to get to your sweet spot. This is where we take a look at some of the lighter and softer stories making news, and Cruiser, you're up first.
In the sweet spot, here's something that I read at 2 o'clock in the morning. According to Psychology Today, intelligent people are more likely to be nocturnal than people with lower IQ scores. In the study of young Americans, intelligent people went to bed later on weeknights and weekends than their less intelligent counterparts. IQ and sleeping patterns are intertwined. In ancient times, people were known to rise and fall with the sun. Average brains were conditioned to follow this sleep pattern, while intellectual brains defied that pattern to create their own. The data supports what night owls feel. The only real time for living is after everyone has gone to bed. At night, you're typically more uninhibited, and your passionate sides are explored. Finally, there's a point to my raging insomnia, and I've never been happier.
You know, I do it the exact opposite. I like to wake up early, and then I have like 2 hours where it's just me and the world and no one else is there.
I can write early in the morning, and that's about the only thing I do well early in the morning. I've always been a night owl, always.
What time do you go to bed, Michelle?
Like 11:45, 12.
Okay.
So not too late, I don't think. I think that's pretty average.
Somewhere in the middle. What's your average bedtime?
My normal time is when I'm on the road, which I haven't been lately, but you know, I'm most comfortable and I sleep the best if I go to bed at like 4 in the morning and sleep till 10 in the morning. That's when I sleep the soundest.
I can't do that.
Yeah.
10 o'clock every night, or else I'm ruined.
Well, I picked a good job for me for the most part, for most of my life.
All right, Michelle, you're up next.
In the sweet spot, Justin Bieber is in trouble again. The pop star has been arrested in Canada after crashing his ATV into a minivan that was driven by paparazzi. Bieber apparently got into a fight that turned physical after the crash. Bieber now faces charges of dangerous driving and assault. He will be in court later this month. And of course, he is still on probation for egging his neighbor's home. So he just keeps getting in trouble,
Who would have guessed it? A young guy with celebrity and money gets in trouble.
The first couple of times it was kind of cute and we made fun of it, but now we're at the whole Lindsay Lohan-esque kind of stage where you have to start wondering, fearing for his safety and his future.
You start feeling bad.
Yeah.
All right, in my sweet spot, how young is too young to have a cell phone? Kids as young as 10 are now sporting smartphones. A 2012 study by the National Consumers League found that 60% of parents let their 10 or 11-year-olds have their own cell phone. Flash forward to 2 years later, and about 80% of teens between the ages of 12 and 17 own a cell phone. Some schools let kids bring cell phones to school, but are not allowed to use them in class. Sprint is even marketing phones to kids as young as 5 years old. And you know what? I don't think this is that big of a deal. I don't have kids, but if I did, I'd probably let them have phones because I'd want to be able to get a hold of them wherever they were.
That's the best thing about them is you can keep track of the kids all the time. My daughter was 4 when her mother and I got divorced, so we got her a cheap little phone just so she knew that she could always call the other parent. So she's had a phone since she was 4, and it never was a big abusive problem, right? She used it to call and say goodnight to me when she was at her mom's house and vice versa, and that was pretty much it. And that's what she did until she got to high school.
How old were you when you got your first phone, Michelle?
I was 14 when I got my first phone. However, I was 12 when I got my beeper. Remember the little pagers?
Yeah.
I was 12.
I don't know why I went to a Sanford and Son song there. That made no sense whatsoever.
All right, that's going to do it for today's show. How young is too young to have a cell phone? What about the beheading of Steven Sotloff? We want to know what you think, so be sure to leave your comments in the comment section below. I'm John Phillips for Stephen Cruiser, joining me here in Los Angeles, and Michelle Fields in Washington, D.C. Thanks so much for watching The Rundown.